I'm not an expert in that at all. Eventually, definitely that might, because I don't deal with that. And near to see health department, while like Des definitely described it in certain places, like where they're above or over us, or in some places they're not. So, but in terms of regular, like that, that's their thing. We don't license hospitals, we don't license health care facilities generally.
I was unclear throughout the presentation what sources of data you were using. So I kind of got mixed up as far as the whole thing.
That's a hospital.
Okay, so there was no independent data collection.
Yeah, so EMAC actually provides that.
You analyze temporary basis.
I
Delayed.
Where are you from?
Is that changed?
Yeah, so hospital privileges, I think, is someone who needs something, and that's definitely.
Many times.
That's
Right, right. I understand.
but that's definitely a question.
If you like raise
We have a large bureau. They made an answer to my
as far as I know. I'm in Utah, so hence not. I'm from Seattle.
Sparks or the
Yeah, and then when it goes, it goes.
Yeah. So, well, that's the goal. Of course,
my one organization to make that a little bit clearer. I was earlier on in the talk because I was in the
And I'm not sure how that works. Someone else is. I think like the federal medical station model. Right, that's how it works. Right. But even, I don't know how that would work. Some other, let's say non-hospital days, even though like surgeons, labs, have so a lot of they could probably more easily go and work in
So one thing that you could do is
not at a hospital, that's just
hard those up, move them over, have some kind of that survive.
yeah.
Like when I was in Okinawa, Japan, the telephone all kinds of they don't break it.
I don't know, that's an interesting question.
They call it things.
yeah, I'm like, there's a lot.
But I live in Okinawa, that's category 5. Typhoon Kirk, I'll never forget it. Right over there, right over there. And when it stopped, we were in the eye. Looking at it. But anyway, but the infrastructure is built for that.
But also, I'm still
But they not only had the hospitalization, they had like
instead of using a phase lawyer.
Cat 1s and 2s.
psychiatry.
Keep golfing. The joke was, it's like, I don't even know if you're in Okinawa, Japan, but it's a small island, similar to where it's going. The Japanese, they love golf, so it's really built up. And they have driving ranges with cities. And so I said, next time, that's going to take it serious. All right. I think I hope that, you know, I don't know. Standing there, we're wondering. Yeah, that's just still up.
Mike, thank you. Thank you. Are you going to take a 1 minute for this shows? Dynamics thing?
No, but the only way we
There must be some.
Yesterday, it might be yesterday.
There are some things that you have to
Bringing the right
do
people to
No, I mean,
I say, as an amazing guy, well, that's, you know, that's what I want people that can assimilate, work, you know, understand, emergency managers, understand that by the time they got there, the emergency managers have been working for 7 hours already. They're not going to be hugging you and, you know, so well, understand those team dynamics, you know, when you arrive, they were still into a disaster area, then no one is there is going to hug you, you know, everybody's already tired. You know, by the time you arrive, you know, fed up, getting people like that, because, most of you have been, working.
They still getting on this thing.
We laid it on the ground, it was like, right, and then less than 24
So I
hours.
wasn't part of that, but I was part of that.
I was just like, there was an active shooting, right where we were staying.
So there was another group
So it was, yeah, it was
trying to do something similar, but just with CMS.
Except for the trauma.
exactly.
Although I think like when I was.
I have a question for you. Prescriptive.
Yeah, a lot of
Like ready for recovery, and I think it's hard for locals to think about what
So did you publish in that
we've done it. As we've done that. And I think that was, in talking to folks who are now still down there, and then talking a couple months ago to Dr. Davis, the former commissioner, she was invaluable. So how do we do that as you're in the gateway?
So I know before Marissa stole Nick's out, we were working on prescriptive mission requests for that.
And I like it, Mike said.
We can build them, we can build them, and we have, Green Month, they run the email, they run the system.
Right, because we have to shop them, like we can write them, we have to shop them to the locals who may not know what they need, right? And that's the challenge with
But
that.
these prescription stuff, what Mike said about disciplinary, in relation to the data person, an engineer, especially post-event, this building is up, you're gonna take people here, get them out, this is the assessment, no more assessment, we're done. Here, so let me call an engineer to come now, and look at this, you wanna have a disciplinary thing that can make decisions.
The important thing is we can identify.
You know what? He's working.
Apply public health things.
But the issue is
Hi, I'm Megan. Yes. There you go. Yeah.
that's the hard
Okay.
Medical teams are a little bit different.
And then really my last name.
We should probably
Like when I talk to my students.
hardest part I
Yeah, first day class. Like,
go down.
that's not a good practice.
right. It's not what you say. It's like this gentleman.
I do need something.
We should talk to this gentleman over here because he wants to get the question about that specifically, about credentialing on the medical side, which I did not and do not want to answer.
I'm the only one.
Well, the thing is that that's the credentialing and the other nice thing other than the liability of the
Nice to meet you again. Great. And it's also
And I'm going to follow up with you because maybe I'll get Katie involved. Because I have a project.
I probably asked the mine and you guys to work on the power outage.
They're always asking me for stuff.
I didn't
Yes.
So we did,
Yeah.
of course we did, like, because that's like a tourist trap. And then,
Very kind of active.
One of the jobs I did for them was running the
Yeah. No, it was great. I mean,
I have friends with them.
it was. So,
I'm looking for what?
a little hard to be like, yeah.
Went out for extra. Yeah, I went out for like extra days.
But it was like just roughly
Yeah, it was great.
wonderful, which was inspired team, great doctoral work. It was really
From last night.
Yeah, so that was good. Yes,
Yeah. No, that's I mean,
yeah.
these fans, yeah, they would go to barbecue and be like, oh, bring it to this.
Yeah.
you're moving from where?
Totally.
I felt bad for my friends.
Right.
We had some classic
He loves it. You like send this girl or you have a mom? It's like so family. Great. So you know, doing good. I guess the housing is expensive. Right, but that's my point. I'm like, okay, but this where'd you pay my yeah, wherever you go.
I found out I was from an area or something that my condition was
You're still at an exponentially you're running out of space. Like you're doing that.
Hi everybody, welcome back. We'll get a few more of the folks that we had yesterday. But we're going to start now though, rather than wait too much longer. Is that okay with everybody? Just get started? Yeah, okay. All right, so we're back to the facilitation team. Teresa?
Maria.
And Liz. Since we did the folder thing yesterday, we'll just jump in. So we have a bit of a slideshow to first of all give you the frame of reference that we want to take today. It's a little bit reviewing back to tomorrow, or back to yesterday.
Back to tomorrow.
Back to tomorrow. I'm like, why does that not sound right? Back to yesterday, and then looking forward to tomorrow. And then we have, we'll review the material that was created yesterday, and then go over what we like, what we're been asked to do today, and then get you started doing it. Okay? And so Katja's gonna give us the background, and we'll go from there.
So this was the instruction manual that we were given as facilitators, and we are looking today at day 2, and it's a small little figure, and I will have a bigger figure in a second. So basically what we try to find out today is how can we remember the mission statements that we developed yesterday and the key themes or principles and work towards them. What are our actions to go towards those real-world changes, outputs, and impacts? And because what you propose also implies a change in the world, we also need to think about what are those mechanisms that generate this change. Is it maybe a change in behavior that is needed? Is it a change in perception or in valuation of things that is needed? Or is it a change in technology and how we use the technology? So, what I would like us to do is, at the left side, you see what you came up with yesterday. You had ideas, in your mission statements and your visions, you had ideas how the world would look like in a year from now, and how RISE would look like and what RISE would be able to achieve. And I tried to kind of just summarize this. And today we would like to work on the right box and think about what projects we would need to do to realize those outcomes and impacts. And if we do those projects, what changes would we need to try to get going so that at the end we really see differences in people's behaviors, in the way of we build infrastructures, etc. And in the background of this slide, you see what they call a logic model. And I really like logic models because it helps you plan forward and evaluate whether you achieved what you wanted to achieve. And if we look at the logic model from the right side, we can think about what are the inputs that we need in order to realize what we want to realize. And inputs can be people, resources, it can be financial inputs, it can be knowledge that we need, it can be like a political window of opportunity, it could be an input. And then what are the outputs of actions? So yesterday we were thinking, or let's say this morning I was in a session about mini-grids, electric mini-grids, so an output would obviously be a solar installation. An output would also be a community committee that governs this solar installation. An output would be that the currency runs in the community. The outcomes then would be that more money is maintained in the community, that people feel empowered because they are now controlling their own electrical grid, that they have a sense of increased safety. So outcomes are more intangible things and outputs are very concrete, tangible things. And then the long-term impacts of those outcomes could be that these communities feel really self-empowered and feel in a better position to self-govern, and that would then build community resilience, which was a theme that was resonating across groups yesterday. So that's the kind of logic model, and we started yesterday from the end, from the changes in the world that you want to see, and today we think about the projects that allow us to achieve those changes and what sort of changes we need to plan for. Did I now complicate it or simplify it?
Yeah.
Yes to both.
Do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I just have a quick question, partly a comment, about this word convergence that we've been talking about a couple times today. And I don't mean to get into a long discussion, but I'm thinking of outcome as more concrete than you're defining it. And so I'm just curious, is there actually a framework about how you're distinguishing output from outcome and why one is more concrete than the other?
Yes, so I'm referring to the logic model. I know it's kind of a weird word, but it is the term for this kind of theory. And they differentiate outputs from outcomes from impact. And yeah, output is, how I understood it, really a very concrete, tangible thing, action, change in networks. And sorry, that's the output. The outcome is a more intangible change in perceptions, values, schemes, ways of how people relate to each other. And then the impact is what we really aspire, for example, with the Sustainability Development Goals, that at the end there is no hunger, that we maintain healthy ecosystems. That would be the impact. That's longer term and more difficult to measure. You want to?
No, I was standing up on a completely different process issue, so I apologize for the interruption.
Yeah. And so just briefly to bring everyone back up to speed, Group 1 yesterday identified network versus single-way relationships. They really encouraged everyone to look at the human side of networks and the connections and value the human element in those networks. And that in a year from now we would have established those networks and we would see the community as the central hub or the vocal point, the vocal and local point of resiliency. And then for Group 2, similar theme around networks, they termed it as partnerships, that RISE networks would address real-world communities' problems, that the RISE network would expand beyond academia and increase partnerships with other stakeholders in disasters and across all phases of the disaster management cycle, preparedness, response, recovery, and reconstruction. You see again the notion of building resilient communities, and that there's also an element of empowering these resilient communities by providing them with the tools and information that they need to implement solutions that are unique to their local needs. Group 3 was really concerned with the fragmented data that currently exists. There's a wealth of data, but without really coming up with making this data accessible and aggregated and integrated, we would not achieve our goal. They also recommended that it's important to develop communication strategies, and that in the research approaches that the RISE network takes, they need to be more transdisciplinary. That implies collaboration between researchers and community members, and more holistic. And the mission statement was to improve transdisciplinary data and networks to provide holistic solutions and plans for building resilient communities. And then group 4 focused on 1 year from now, the RISE network would have contributed to measurable outcomes. The silos would be broken down because we build relationships. We have an asset inventory, community participation in the network, and we can share exemplifying success stories that allow others to replicate projects and successes.
We didn't have flip charts from all of the groups, so if this was your group, please let us know.
So here, similar, you see the theme, a platform for interdisciplinary collaboration that works with communities. So that goes back to the holistic transdisciplinary part. This group also was very concerned about mitigating unequal power structures and power structures as they exist between universities within the RISE network, as well as power structures that exist between universities and the communities the network would serve. And also this group was calling for a shift from theory to action, and that action should result in concrete, small, realizable projects that can be done with support of local people.
Does anybody recognize that?
Group 8.
Group 8?
Okay, cool. Because we have 3 more like that with question marks. So we had the recording, but we didn't have flip charts.
So then we had a group that focused on improving pre-disaster preparedness levels and to develop a program that takes at its core ethics and accounts for IRB protocols, and to spread and promote principles of innovation, adaptability, cultural responsiveness, solidarity, and workforce development. And they came up with the following mission statement: RISE is a network that empowers communities to build resiliency through community-engaged research that prioritizes ethical collaborative practice and innovative knowledge sharing and exchange between various stakeholders. Anyone recognizes that group? It's 3?
No, that's not.
Yeah, we have 3.
Yeah, we already have 3 up there.
I think it's group 7.
Conversion. 7. So 8 and then 7.
Perfect.
Okay.
Next one. This group said expand beyond the present institutions to address economic governance and community resilience issues. And their mission statement goes as follows: RISE is an international epicenter of research, strategy, translation and implementation for defining resiliency before, during and after disaster to secure governance, community economies and the environment. Perfect.
Okay, so 8, 7, 6 so far. How well organized is that? Oh.
Oh, but that's actually group 5. Yes.
Yes, okay, that's group 5. Okay.
Okay,
So
so
8, 7, 6, 5.
and group 5 then, we will fix this. Had as key themes: move from theory to practice, moving away from what-if scenarios to what might be, to concrete ideas that can be implemented, integrate disaster preparedness and emergency management into curricular offerings, and then use social media and other virtual environments to do webinars so that we can share ideas. And that also resonates with what an earlier group was saying about propagating successful stories. And similar as group 3, group 5 was also concerned with creating a database, not about the data, but university assets to identify the unique capabilities that exist at each university and how to help us determine where these experiences and assets can best be employed. RISE will emerge as a stakeholder-inclusive catalyst to integrate universities and evidence-based disaster preparedness, response, and recovery efforts. we also created the drafts, but I think we refreshed it. So in the interest of time, I'm maybe not going over the draft. But you will see we collected this information for you and it will be made available at a later stage in the reports. So now, I hope that was a refresher of the world that you envision in 2020, or if you need more time, that's fine too. And the kind of projects that you wanted to create, such as creating a university database of assets, or a database of the fragmented data that exists, or thinking about local solutions. So today we really want to think about specific projects that you can do to work towards those outputs and outcomes.
So there isn't much more to say beyond that marvelous summary. Thank you. Right? This is so we did put in some time to just talk about what's your reaction to what you said yesterday. Now that you've had a little bit of time to think about it, are there single mission statements that you'd want as a large group to select and work just on that? Would someone argue for the integration of one or two of these groups' ideas and use that to reflect everybody's opinions? Or should we stay with 8 different views at this point? The choices are yours, 1 and 2.
Could we go back to them real quick, just to just look at the mission?
I'm sorry, we can't hear over, I can't hear you over here.
Okay, all right.
I just said that if we could go back to each mission statement real quick, so we could.
We might need to go back one step further, because I couldn't hear you either.
Okay, sorry. It's very unusual that I can't be heard. Maybe it's the cold. So basically what I was saying is, so our job going forward is this, right? To think about actions, as Katja has said. What are the things that have to be done or that you recommend could be done? And we can work as the researchers and practitioners cohort on 8 different sets of actions. We could look back at those 8 products that you all produced and think about some of the themes or the principles and potentially come up with a subset of goal statements or kind of themes and then divide those among the groups. So we're really kind of asking you, do you want to continue with the 8 groups with the 8 separate ideas, although there's obviously lots of overlap? Or do we want to spend some time trying to do some collapsing? And then 2 of your colleagues had suggestions. One was to just review, go back over and look at them now that we know what we want you to do with them, right? So it's always good to know the question before we make a decision. And then we have a second, what's the second comment in the back?
Yesterday it was sort of focused on mission statements and what's RISE, and then today there's action statements and there's goal statements, all of which I think are very different things. I personally am interested in the action statements. I sort of wonder if RISE is sort of a loose confederation and what it becomes is a smaller group to figure that out in terms of the network. But I feel like so many of us are here to get things done. So can we focus more on the actions and the project focused work?
That's exactly our intention. So if this statement isn't clear, all I'm asking is, do you want to talk about actions associated with all 8 of the ideas? All of the 8 discussions that the group had? Or do you want to come up with a smaller set of mission statements that you could focus the action development that you're going to be doing for the next hour on? So that's the question. So is that... Right, so this is all about action statements, so I know you want to go back and look at the list, but I'll do that. Over here and then over there.
One of the questions along these lines, though, I know there's 3 other breakout sessions with different focus. So are we the one that is working on the so-called mission statement, or are all the other breakout sessions also trying to devise a mission statement to RISE?
No, everybody's doing exactly the same thing from their professional perspective. So we're not working on the mission statement today, we're done.
Okay.
Unless you all say, we want to spend the next 10 minutes picking the best of what we read. If you do, we can do that. Otherwise, we can go back into your 8 groups and you can start working on action statements. So the goal today is action statements, not more mission statement work. But you want to be sure that you're working with either your own mission statement from your group or a collective set of mission statements that you'd like to identify with.
I know it may take some time, but is it possible to find the commonalities that run through the 8? and then narrow our scope based on that.
So
We're also a lot smaller than yesterday, so I do wonder if there's some of us who are like, I would really love to talk about how we move forward on this, and sort of World Cafe style, and just see if we get 4 or 5 groups that coalesce.
On the
I'm
contrary,
trying to
though,
help.
I'm curious to see if anybody has a shared opinion on this. The statements from yesterday to me seem so broad. Like each subclause has 3 or 4 items, and I think as practitioners, like myself, I speak about my own experience. It's hard for me to think about an action on such like a comprehensive mission statement. I think a mission statement as being so comprehensive is maybe a good fit for the organization, but when we talk about like as practitioners, what can we do in our groups?
So talk to your colleagues, you're trying to convince them, not us. We'll do whatever you all decide.
I don't know, in our areas of expertise, like I have trouble moving forward with like even a greater conglomeration of all of the things, which I feel like might become like a leading
I was gonna just give an example.
Yeah.
Like, all the workshops I've gone to, a lot of folks have gone have been about the ethics of how we enter into community. So would some folks actually like to develop some work and think about how it is we move that forward and come up with stuff that helps people for in the next disaster, or frames how we do our work. Like, that's just an example that might.
Was there another comment over here?
Sure. If I look at the end result, and correct me if I'm wrong, if each of the cohorts are supposed to report out tomorrow afternoon, then it would seem to me that we need to have some sort of uniformity or at least agreement on what our vision is, and then the action statements associated with that. I do agree that some of the mission statements are fairly long, complex, but some are shorter. I would agree with the suggestion posed in the back that we take a few minutes to look at the mission statements, see if we see some commonality, and then from that commonality, focus on, if we see streams of ideas that come through in each of the mission statements, then focus on action statements that address those common streams of ideas that come forth through the mission statements.
I would echo that. I think one of the things I noticed yesterday when we were talking was that everyone in our group, when we initially sat down and started talking, kind of had different conceptualizations of what RISE was, and I think that also is coming through in some of the mission statements. And so I think it would be worthwhile to just find those common themes so that collectively we're all more on the same page.
So that sounds good. I wanted just to throw in one kind of middle ground option, because with these 2 slides we tried to pull together the commonalities, and it's also what we summarized yesterday.